wondering, why conversational? Well, for all the talk of hashtag engagement hacks, it's really easy to overlook the obvious, which is to start by engaging your people in a simple conversation. And that goes for not just your live interactions with them, but from the moment they discover you, whether it's on your website or an Instagram caption. We want to make sure we're doing what we can to just facilitate a give and a take of a normal human conversation. It's going to be much more effective, and it's going to help draw them in and spark that connection. So I put up a call for examples from you that we could work with, and I chose one. So many thanks to this occupational therapist who works with children for offering up a piece of their writing that we can work with. So this is just a snippet of what would be an Instagram caption paired with an image of this activity that they're describing here. But I just chose an excerpt here because it still illustrates the 3 points that we talked about in this week's blog post. So you'll see right here, it's a really great start. Something new I've been using in my work is a bin filled with sensory items of different shapes and colors. Kiddos empty the bin and then sort the items by shape, color, etc. while we talk about each one. They have loved it, and it has been so much fun to see their skills in action. So you can see, it's a great piece of writing. There's nothing wrong with it. Our task here is to try and make it even more conversational. And so just to illustrate this point, I'm going to walk you through each of our 3 steps. And again, if you haven't checked out the blog post yet, you can get there through the link in my bio. It's the first link. Otherwise, you're welcome to check it out. I will include it in the description once this gets saved to IGTV. But let's just press on here. So our first step, or our first filter that we're running this through, is to speak to one person. Because if you think about it, if we go back to our goal of engaging the person who's on our page in a conversation, we sometimes think we have to flag their attention, like, hey, welcome, hey you. But in reality, what better way to engage someone than to pose a question directly to them right away? So that's what I've done here. Wondering what your kiddo's been up to in OT this week? Just a simple question, but already you can tell someone is addressing you. The other difference here is that because this person, this occupational therapist, is not out there trying to connect with the children directly in marketing her practice, she's speaking to the parents and caregivers, the gatekeepers of these kiddos. And so it makes a lot of sense to address them directly. And so it's not just about all kiddos, it's your kiddo. The other difference here is, rather than starting with something new I've been using in my work, where it's very focused on the business owner, instead we're framing it immediately around the person we're speaking to and their child. So it's subtle, right? But it makes a really big difference in terms of the impact here. So wondering what your kiddo's been up to in OT this week, and then down below, instead of they, it's your kiddo. Super simple, but that's the very first filter I recommend you run your copy through. Who am I speaking to, and is it evident that I'm just speaking to them? Okay, step 2, we want to embrace the contraction. And this is such a funny one because it almost is laughably simple. Like, really? I'm just using contractions? But it makes such a difference in terms of how accessible and how digestible information is on the page. So, there are times, and I should say this person has used contractions throughout this excerpt, but down at the bottom, instead of they have loved it and it has been so much fun, just swapped that out simply with they've loved it and it's been so much fun. You see how and sometimes we can't tell the difference until we actually hear it back. So just speak it out loud. You can record yourself and listen back, and you can tell it's a little clunkier when we don't make use of contractions, when we don't incorporate them. And it doesn't have to be, it's not all or nothing. It's simply sprinkling them in where it makes sense to. You get to decide. For instance, there might be a situation where you choose deliberately not to use a contraction. I do this a lot when I want to emphasize something. So instead of, you don't need to worry about that, I might want to convey, you do not need to worry about that. And when you don't have the benefit of your inflection and your voice, we rely on the words on the page. So that's one consideration to keep in mind. But by and large, because online our brains are trained to skim, we benefit from a lot of white space, which we'll talk about in a minute, and we benefit from contractions because we tend to hear the words on the screen as we're reading them. Anything that facilitates that flow is going to benefit us and the person we're communicating with. Okay, final step here. Chop it up. Chop, chop, chop. Okay, so I think we can, I'm gonna just lower this. Hopefully you can see this all. But basically, I've just taken what's written here and fragmented it into separate lines. Now, again, there aren't hard and fast rules. You don't need to chop up every single sentence. It just worked out that way here. But wherever it makes sense to, again, we're trying to infuse lots of white space on the page that just is going to make this so much more inviting and digestible to the person that we're speaking to. But the other way that we've chopped it up is by using a sentence fragment. So if you look at the second line right here, using this bin filled with sensory items, that might be triggering all kinds of like rule breaking alarms in your head right now, because it is a sentence fragment. That's not a complete sentence. That little fragment there, using this bin, might have earned you a red pen like mark on your paper back in the day. The important thing to remember is what served us then is not necessarily going to serve us now. If we are aiming for conversational copy, conversational communication, it's totally legit. This is legitimate to use sentence fragments strategically. So, wondering what your kiddo's been up to in OT this week? Using this bin filled with sensory items. It's a give and a take, call and response conversation. I hope you see this is not rocket science, but when we break it down into these steps, we really start to see how these small tweaks in concert work together to really make our communication more influential and more effective. So we've chopped it up here. We've got all of this together. And so all told, all together here, I just want to show you for comparison. This is our before. Again, nothing wrong with this, but you can already see that, your mind is having to kind of sift through here and see what it is you're actually looking at. Also, the way it begins does not necessarily let me know that it's speaking to me, and so I might feel a little bit like more of a passerby, like this is text that may or may not have something to do with me. We also see that it's in this condensed, dense paragraph, and again, what makes perfect sense on the page of a novel is not going to land the same way in online communication. This is dense. Even though this would be a small paragraph by any other standard and none of these sentences are run-ons, again, it was really great source material. It's just a different landscape, and so we need to play by a new set of guidelines. So we compare that to our finished version here. And hopefully you see, I look at this and I just think, okay, this is inviting. My brain can wrap itself around this. And now I'm already invested. I'm already more part of this. So I hope this illustration is useful. Let me know. If you're catching this as part of the replay crew, let me know below what you took from this, if this is useful. And most of all, if you try this out, I hope you do, on a piece of your own copy, tag me, let me know so that I can come check it out and give you all kinds of props, because this is the kind of practice that's very easy not to do. And yet when we make the time to do it, we get better. We see the return on our efforts. So thank you for being here. Have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you soon. Bye.